Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here this morning. We're going to go ahead and get started, and thank you as well for your patience. Thank you those who are joining online as well, and we have an online audience, so I also welcome them. With that, I will kick off the panel discussion on the chilling effect, the psychosocial effects of online violence against journalists. My name is Leanne Grimm. I'm the project director for the SAFE initiative at IREX. This is a project that aims to support journalists, media practitioners, social communicators, helping them to build skills in risk management and resilience, focused on holistic safety, and this includes physical, digital, and psychosocial. As part of IREX, I can say that IREX is a global organization that strives for a more just, prosperous, and inclusive society. And I will also just note that some of this work that IREX has been doing in journalist safety, we've been conducting for 10 years. I have the privilege of leading this SAFE global team, and I will also just acknowledge that I do have two of my excellent colleagues on this panel with me today from IREX. I will introduce the panelists shortly. But first, I want to thank UNESCO for co-organizing this event along with IREX. So for the next 90 minutes or so, I will guide this conversation. We'll begin, of course, with panelist introductions. There will be some rounds of questions, and then there will be an open period for Q&A from the audience. So I ask you all to keep that in mind. Please take notes of anything you may want to ask later, and I will let you know when we're ready for that. I also want to acknowledge that some of this conversation, the content could be a bit difficult and sensitive. We're talking about people's personal experiences with online violence and how that has impacted them from the psychosocial perspective. So I just want to acknowledge that and also ask for everyone's respect and sensitivity to the conversation. I do invite all the panelists to be as open and transparent as they feel comfortable. And I thank you all in advance for that. So I'll begin with the objective of our discussion for today. We, of course, are aiming to shine light on the psychosocial impact of online violence, looking particularly at journalists who identify as women or are from other marginalized groups. This may come in the form of hate speech, misinformation, disinformation rather, doxing, physical and sexualized threats. There's a severe impact that this can have on one's mental health. And this online violence is not only harmful to the individual at the psychosocial level, but can also lead them to self-censor and potentially even leave the profession altogether, with the intention of this online violence being to discredit and silence journalists. I want to also note a recent publication, The Chilling. Of course, this was produced in coordination between UNESCO and the International Center for Journalists. This is a great resource. I believe there are printed copies near the entrance or exit, so please feel free to check that out. I will note a couple statistics from that document. Based on the surveys of women journalists, nearly 3 out of 4 that were surveyed suffered online abuse as a result of their work and identifying simply as a woman. Of them, about 40% say that they became less visible as a result, losing airtime and losing professional opportunities. And then a third of those considered leaving the profession altogether due to those attacks. So this online violence it's intimidating, it is silencing, and as a result, it has that chilling effect across the journalism industry. And when these key voices are silenced, it is a threat to freedom of expression for all of us. To address this, of course, we need to find solutions that protect women and marginalized journalists and also prevent the online violence from occurring in the first place. So with that, I am honored to welcome our group of panelists. I want to briefly introduce them. I will start with Javeria Siddique, who is joining us online. This is due in part to some of the risks and online violence that she's currently facing. She is a journalist and professional photographer who focuses on aviation. She's also the widow of prominent journalist Arshad Sharif, who was killed in October. I believe that she is indeed with us, and we will be able to see her behind me shortly. Apologies for any technical difficulties there. Next, I'll start with Mhanna, furthest from me. She's a psychotherapist and trauma expert. She also works with IREX and the SAFE Initiative, and she leads a team that is supporting journalists across the MENA region. We have Elodie Vialle. She is a journalist and a fellow at Harvard's Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society. She's also an advisor on digital safety and online harassment, and she's working with PEN America as well. And I have Ephraim Muchemi here. He's a digital security expert and trainer. He focuses on digital literacy and building resilience. He also works with IREX's SAFE Initiative. He's a deputy regional manager directly supporting journalists across East Africa. So now with that, I would like everyone to have the opportunity to hear directly from the panelists themselves. I would like to invite Javeria to speak first, but I'm not sure that we have her connected at the moment. Let's try. Javeria, if you are here with us, I invite you to please share a little bit more about yourself. And if you could kindly highlight why the content of this discussion is important to you today. Why is it important that we talk about the psychosocial impacts of online violence? Please, Javeria, go ahead.
Thank you, Lee, and thank you to all other participants. I hope you all are listening to me. My name is Javeria Siddique, and I'm a working journalist and columnist and photographer too. And my area of interest is aviation, defense, health, and human rights. And since 2008, I'm part of media. And I'm working, and I'm author of a book as well. It's on APS incident in 2014 when Peshawar school was attacked by the terrorist, and 144 civilian was killed inside the school, including 122 children. And as I'm very much active on social media, I know how to make trends. I know how to use social media, how to use it effectively for your own work and for campaigns. So I have 1 million of followers. I'm not some kind of celebrity, but thanks to the population of India and Pakistan, people who understand Urdu, thanks to them, I have 1 million of followers on social media. I always share my work on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, and I'm a very active user of all these platforms. I'm sure you can hear me and see me now as well. It's a very difficult to discuss and talk about, which I have been through, because if you can see behind me, it's my husband. And I have lost him in October 2022. And I'm still in my mourning period. In Islam, we have, I follow Islam, I'm a Muslim. In our mourning period, we mourn for a husband 4 months and 10 days. And in this, we are not allowed to get married and to have a relationship, sexual relationship, and we mourn for husband. After that, Islam allows me to get married again, have inheritance in his property, and to do work and education, everything. But we have to just hold ourselves for 4 months and 10 days. But I think I will mourn for him for a lifetime. I loved him. We have spent 11 years together. He was booked in 16 fake cases in Pakistan, and he left country in a hurry. So he don't have much visas, and government of UAE asked him to leave UAE. Then he went to Kenya because Pakistanis don't get much visas on arrival. So he was shot and dead. So I have seen violence on the ground as well, and online as well before his death, because as a journalist, I am so vocal. I was vocal. I'm not vocal anymore. Now I put with self-censorship on myself. I have decreased the usage of social media, and because I can't forget all that happened to me and him in October. He was lying dead with a bullet wounds in hospital. I was with him. I saw him. I buried him, and I feel like I am also buried with him because it was a worst kind of violence to make silent journalist on his work, on his bravery. He was anti-corruption. He was neither anti-state, anti-institution. He just hated corruption and he exposed so many scandal of powerful people. Then I'm pursuing his case other than my work. So trolls and haters started campaign against me that I got married in my iddat, which is not allowed in Islam for these 4 months and 10 days. It was so lethal and it was so dangerous for me that now I'm confined mostly inside my house, four walls. Right now, I'm sitting in my library. I supposed to visited him in a graveyard or went to see my doctors because one need therapy or medication after that kind of violence, which I have faced in October for no reason because he was a very patriotic and nice man. I'm really sorry because I'm still suffering now, so I'm crying. I'm sorry, everyone. So whenever now I go out, what is the impact of all this on my health and on myself? I'm depressed. I have a crying spells. I'm facing a hair loss. I don't feel like to eat. I can't sleep properly, but still I'm working because journalism is my passion and it's my source of income as well. After this threat, I have complained to so many people, like unions, Coalition of Women Journalists, and my followers. They really supported me. They trend for me. There was 50-60,000 tweets in solidarity for me and for Arshad and for this all fake campaign. But I was amazed to see my fellow colleagues who are primetime anchors or who work in the English dailies in Pakistan, they were silent. I think they all are now afraid of the killers of Arshad because he was booked in 16 fake cases in Pakistan. And when he left country to save his life, later he was killed. He told me clearly there is a threat and the powerful people whom he was exposing their corruption. They wanted to get me killed. I'm afraid they will shoot me in the head. And same was happened in the Kenya, and still no one is arrested in this case. So violence, whether it's online or on ground, it have an impact on a journalist emotionally, mentally, physically. It's not me who is suffering right now in my family. My elder parents are suffering as well because that campaign was designed properly by the trolls and the government sympathizer that I got married, so they received the messages of on their personal numbers, on WhatsApp, on Facebook, on Twitter and YouTube. And why we can't able to do anything? Because Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and other social media forums never recognize Urdu language. And when people spread hate against us or people spread some kind of negativity for women journalists, it's mostly in Urdu. The person sitting in Ireland who is in Pakistani, the person sitting is in Holland who is Pakistani, spreading fake news against me and putting my life in the danger. But no one is able to help me because they always said after reporting the tweets and videos and Facebook content that we never found any violation in that. So the women who is doing journalism in Urdu language, mostly in Pakistan and India, they are suffering a lot because of this factor. And we don't have any help or any social support, psychological support here to get better and to get work again. So I will tell you later more that what we are facing as a women journalist, as a widow, and then what the options we have to do for the safety of women journalists. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Javeria. I want to express my sympathies for everything that you're enduring right now. And I thank you for showing the bravery and sharing this experience. You've touched on a lot of really important issues that I know we'll come back to today as well. But I do want to turn to the rest of the group here, and perhaps we'll start again for this from myself with Aya. If you could just share a little bit more about yourself and why this topic is important to you.
Thank you, Leanne, and hello, everyone. So my name is Mhanna. I am a Lebanese clinical psychologist and psychotherapist, but I also work as the regional manager for one of the centers that SAFE initiative from IREX work on. And beside my work as a therapist and as someone who was also a very active woman from the Middle East to talk about freedom of expression and women's rights and vulnerable communities' rights, I felt with the past at least 13 years working with journalists from the Middle East, but also journalists from Europe and other countries, that there's kind of a very big gap in how people in general support the journalists who are violated in their human side, and how journalists are being treated based on their gender and not specifically and always based on their competence and ability and professional ability. So this is something that I really wanted to work more on based on the work that we do with SAFE as safety support and training journalists on how to better prepare themselves to the aftermath of their freedom of speech and their brutal honesty in regions where they are not really well welcomed, but also how to find better ways to connect them and create this type of solidarity with people who understand their struggles legally, digitally, physically, and also mentally. So I do what I do, and I really want to keep on working on online violence and its effect on mental health, because people are still trying to find ways to support, but it's also countered by daily online attacks, specifically to vulnerable groups that are not considered the way they should in our areas. And yeah, I think I have the freedom of being able to speak up. And this is why I hope I can keep on doing what we're doing and be with people who understand its importance. So thank you.
Thank you, Aya. Elodie, would you please continue?
Yeah, thank you, Lee. So my name is Elodie Vialle, and I am a French journalist, digital advisor on safety of journalists, working with PEN America, and I'm a fellow at the Berkman Klein Center at Harvard at the Institute for Rebooting Social Media. So I've been a trainer for journalists for the last decades and focusing over the last few years on digital safety of journalists. So what I've observed, of course, is the huge psychological impacts of online harassment. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that this is a tactic, this is an orchestrated tactic to muzzle journalists, to intimidate journalists. Currently, at the Berkman Klein Center, I'm working on developing a project, an escalation channel for journalists facing online harassment, a trauma-informed support for journalists with a communication process with social media platforms. And so I'm happy to share more about that. I'm also happy to share more about the research we've done with PEN America, with concrete recommendations for social media platforms on how to concretely mitigate the psychological impact of online harassment for journalists. There's solutions, there's a way to do it, and also to discuss resources and a topic which is still a bit taboo in the journalistic community, which is self-care, mental health. That's something we don't discuss that much within newsrooms, and I think it's time to do it. So thank you so much for hosting this conversation.
Thank you, Elodie. Ephraim, please.
So I am Ephraim. I am a digital security trainer and in East Africa, but also at the same time, I do offer emergency support when it comes to not only digital safety, but also other. But the approaches which I like using is more on behavior change and less about tech support. And because many people do tend to forget the fact that once an attack has been carried out, there's a psychological impact to it. At times, I know I've been called a therapist and I have to say, no, I'm not a therapist. After me, you need to go and spend time with a therapist. And it's something we are trying to normalize and trying to inculcate trauma approaches when it comes to not only just emergency support, but also during training. Because in the end, you're talking to a human, and in most of the attacks which do get carried out, there is either a human behind it, and also there's a human also being impacted at the end. So there is this in my region, which I do come from, and I mostly work with the most marginalized group of journalists who tend to be ignored. And it pains me when I see them being ignored. It's because there's heavy focus on what you call the mainstream media outlets, but there are journalists who are out there who maybe get $200 a month, and they do get heavily impacted to a point that they don't engage. But that journalist who earns $200 a month, they do serve a huge community. And if they do get cut out from being able to report and impacting the community because of their psychological impact, that means that community won't get the level of freedom of expression there. And this raises space for impunity to creep in. And this is what makes me really want to continue pushing for this work. So I'm glad to see our fellow who has joined in online, with her trying to be resilient and pushing on. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much, Ephraim. And thank you all for continuing the introductions and sharing a little bit more about the experience you bring and the perspectives that you come from. I do want to actually go back to Javeria, and I appreciate everything you've already shared with us about your experience, noting things like self-censorship, harassment from trolls online, and along with that, the psychosocial side of things, experiencing depression, even things like hair loss. And I appreciate you sharing all of this. I know a lot of this is very recent. It's occurred just only in the past few months, in fact. And so I recognize the sensitivity of that. I want to ask you, because I understand that this is not your first time experiencing online violence, and there's actually prior experiences that you've been exposed to. I wonder if you would be willing to speak a little bit to some of that, as well as that impact on you. And if you say whether you see this as a reflection of something that other journalists within your own network are also experiencing.
Thank you so much. Actually, I was born in a very loving family. My husband was very kind and supportive, so I enjoy working. I was a very happy person once. I love to do shopping, photography, laughters, to interact with people on social media. I was one of the most interactive social media account on Twitter. I wish people a birthdays, I ask about their health. So my husband also enjoy all this, that I'm a very social person and a happy person, and I take things very lightly. When the first time I was targeted by this campaign, he said to me, leave it, no need to reply on this, because we don't have children together in this 11 years. I don't have children. So people start talking about that thing the first time, which I have heard for myself. They commented on my reproductive health. They commented on my weight, because I put on weight because of this all issues which I have faced. I stay quite. Then I have faced one more campaign against myself, and it was also very dangerous. It was like, we will throw acid on your face and we will rape your children, because I'm very vocal in my opinion still, and I give my opinion and thinkings and thoughts, whatever I'm thinking, I'll post it without any fear. Then 3, 4, 5 campaigns which I have faced, and I have reported one to the Netherlands embassy, because the person was sitting in the Netherlands. Then I reported this to Ireland as well, because mostly they are Pakistani, they speak Urdu language. So they targeted us in a Urdu language. Then I have seen videos for myself, character assassination. Mostly what they do with the female journalists, they do character assassination. And when they try to hit our male colleagues, they put some allegation of corruption. But for the female journalists, they always target our bodies, our appearance, our weight, our complexion, and our relationships. They always target on our like personal life. So when I have faced all this, it have a worse effect on myself. And then they booked my husband in a 16 cases. So I start suffering physically and mentally both. I was suffering from the COVID, and uh, he was harassed by the recent government. And he have to left the country when I was in recovery phase. So you can imagine the trauma which I have faced alone. I was in the recovery. I was concerned for his safety and health. He also wanted to join me, but I can't able to travel at that time because I was extremely unwell. When I lost him, because we were connected on daily basis and call messages, and then I start feeling more anxious, more depressed, and more crying spells. So it's affect not only my physical health, but my mental health as well, my confidence as well, and my work as well. Because I was on the off, I took the off because I was mourning. When I joined the work in January, I do my mostly work from online. I contribute for three prestigious organization, and I do photography as well. But even I stopped photography after October because they start targeting me on my character, and they never let me to mourn what do you say, peacefully for my husband, and because they don't want me to pursue this case, and they want me to stay silent. So right now the women journalists are facing harassment, trolling, cyberbullying, hacking of their accounts. My husband's all social media accounts password has been changed, and people try to hack my account as well, but they can't able to do it. And online harassment is constant tool to use against women journalists, because they want to keep us silent, and they want us to be out from this area of work, because women are also working same like as men in Pakistan, and they are like producing a very fine pieces. So we always get into a trouble whenever we are outspoken on certain issues or on taboo. So my journalist colleagues are now doing few things. There are few are taking therapies. Even I'm taking therapy because I have seen a lot of violence and I'm still suffering. And mostly women have turned off their replies. They post now not regularly, they post often, and few people have deactivated their accounts. And even myself, I covered myself with dupatta and with mask, and then I go out so people can't recognize me, because I feel threatened after my husband killing in October as well. So we all are facing this, women journalists, but I'm mostly targeted by the sympathizer of this current government. It's a system. They always do systematic campaign against us. Like it's not only on Twitter, but it's on Facebook as well, YouTube as well, WhatsApp as well, and mostly in the Urdu language. So social media algorithm never recognize Urdu language, so they get away, and we face a worse kind of campaign and negativity in our life, because if someone is trying to play religion card against me, that is very life threatening, because people get mob lynched in Pakistan after these kind of incidents. So it was the first time I feel very scared and alone as well, because my colleagues were even not supporting me at that time, but thanks to social media and few international organizations, they have supported me, and my lawyers also submitted a complaint in Federal Investigative Agency. But I know nothing is going to be happen, because when I have noticed the trend and the tweets against me mostly were the government sympathizer and the followers who follow this current regime and the government. So we just do one thing. We do start doing self-censorship. We stop posting on social media. We stop interacting. And it is very difficult for me now to even post my work online, because I also now feel a bit scared and uncomfortable, because when he was alive, I was carefree. I was not scared at that time. But now I feel more threatened because he was scared because of his work. So I'm doing work as well and pursuing his case as well. and we still don't have any international lawyer to take his case in Kenyan territory. We just have a lawyers in Pakistan, and we are not getting justice, and no one is arrested so far. So not only me, but the other fellow journalists and female anchors mostly, and female reporters are facing a worse harassment, and it's always based on character assassination, it's on body parts, it's on relationship, and they call us, I can't like, how can I say that words on, like, in the conference when the people are listening to me, but they call us with a bad names, and they use abusive language in they call us, I'm really sorry to say this word, they call us prostitutes. They not take us as a journalist, but they label us with that kind of things which we are not. We are human, we are journalists, and we are just doing our duty. So no one have right to doing character assassination against us and to give us a rape threats or acid throwing threats. And I wish no one can see that kind of violence which I have faced online and after killing of my journalist husband. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And again, I appreciate you sharing such personal experience. And I think you're really, you really are driving home this point of how sexist some of this online violence can be. And I want to invite Aya actually next to jump in on this, because you see the different layers of this type of online violence. And I know from your experience, you're working with other journalists as well, women journalists and journalists from other marginalized groups. Could you speak a little bit to some of that experience and what impact online violence is having on their psychosocial well-being and as well as them professionally?
Yeah, actually, when we think about women journalists or journalists who belong to marginalized and vulnerable communities, we cannot really separate their experience of journalism from their experience mentally. Why? Because when they work on journalism and they want to be able to be vocal and have audience and put themselves kind of in the spotlight, it is not something that different from them in their ego part of the normal ego part of their mental health, wanting to develop their competence, wanting to show their audience what they are working on or what they are documenting, investigating, or reporting on. So the two aspects of being in the spotlight is very important when we consider the mental health and the online violence components. Why? Because it's really directed to what are the consequences of online violence. People would say to journalists being targeted, but you wanted to be in the spotlight. You put yourself in the spotlight. You looked for it in a way. You are looking to be the story instead of working on a story. So this is something we often hear from the journalists that are being targeted by online violence. Why? There are so many reasons. One, also, the reason is, important to mention, is the fact that people don't really understand what online violence is, and when it is not directly physical, when the harassment is not literally following someone in the car or showing up or sending a gift or sending a box to their workplace, they don't really get what does it mean. So it's very hard for the journalists who are attacked to come and say, oh, I have been attacked, and people won't really feel that this is true. So the truth of what they are living is something they live in isolation. And it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of time for the journalist attacked to really feel ready to say it out loud. And when they do, again, they might face the fact that people would consider them wanting even more to be the story, or a pushback from media institutions, from their supposedly support system, because they don't really get why they are taking it so seriously. Like, it's online. It's not something physical. So what they don't know is that these people who are attacked feel isolated in this, and this makes them feel more anxious. And when they are anxious, every aspect in their life is affected. So they become more stressed, they become more fearful, they feel they have this feeling of helplessness. So if no one can directly help me because they don't get that it's online, but it's real, it means that they will not be able to tell me what to do. They often feel that they have lost kind of their competence because they self-censorship a lot. And for a journalist to self-censor themselves, it really means that they are pushing back from what they like to do. And that affects actually their economic life. So when we really think about the mental health aspect, when we talk about online violence, we really think about economic crisis, professional crisis, and all the psychosocial aspect of being isolated, having symptoms of like negativity around us. So I'm not gonna go into like the very detailed mental health details, but as I said, they are stressed, they have anxiety, sometimes they can feel helpless, hopeless, and sometimes they even consider leaving their work, leaving their job, because it doesn't give them the fulfillment they were looking for first. And often we cannot not say it, but many journalists, not just women, specifically people who belong to communities that are considered marginalized or vulnerable in some areas, they even develop suicidal thoughts, and even a statistic number quite high show us that many LGBTIQ plus journalists attempt suicide. And sometimes they are not just unable to seek support, they are even attacked by their own community of journalists. So we really need to make sure that we understand online violence as a very holistic problem, and not just something online on the internet that has a screen protecting us from the reality. Online violence is the reality, and it affects the person mentally exactly the way a physical direct harassment or violence attack does. It's not different. And this is, I think, the first thing to really understand when we want to develop kind of a support system for people attacked online. The effect, psychosocial effect, is exactly the same as physical violence.
Thank you so much. You've touched on so much. I want to turn to Elodie to add to this. As an advisor on online harassment, someone working on digital safety as well, could you speak to some of your experiences, and maybe to build on Aya as well, if you could speak to some of the holistic safety components? What does that look like in terms of the support that you're providing to others?
Thank you so much. I think, Aya, you say the word holistic. It's incredibly important today to implement a holistic safety approach for journalists within newsrooms, and of course for freelancers as well. And most of the safety trainings we've had so far are only focused on the physical safety. And what we've tried to do with PEN America, and what UNESCO developed recently also through the online course with the Knight Center, in partnership with the Knight Center for Journalism in the Americas. The idea is to implement further a holistic approach, and it means physical, digital, and mental health safety. A lot of journalists today are in nervous breakdowns, and I think trauma was the buzzword of the last ECO Summit in New York for the safety of journalists. We've discussed this a lot. I want to also point out a very interesting initiative developed by the Dart Center. They started training therapists because, have you said, it's really, journalists have a very, how can I say it, a very specific mindset, like we're very passionate about our work and we want to keep doing our work. And so it's super important when we've developed a trauma-informed approach to consider this and to take this approach into account. So that's the kind of very interesting initiative we should support. I think there's a lot also to say regarding trainings, what journalists can do. We can have like 2 layers of trainings. We can share mental self-care advice and strategies with them. How to cope on a daily basis with that. And this is something we can share widely in our safety trainings. But I would say also in a more structural level, it's very important also sometimes to acknowledge that advices and strategies are not enough, and it's necessary to go and find a therapist, which is not always very easy. All these things are not, I really appreciate you said it's not just, we have to consider the mental health, the impact on mental health as we considered for physical safety, the impact of violence. And it's also very important as we are at this conference, and tomorrow the conference will focus on really guidelines for regulations of the tech actors. There's a way to mitigate the psychological impact of online abuse in the product itself, to implement solution within social media platforms. During the last consultations on UN safety plan of action for journalists, and there was a lot of discussions within civil society on what tech actors can do concretely to mitigate the impact of online harassment of journalists. So some of the solution exists. I think it's really important also to consider this as we are now talking about regulation. And there's a way, for instance, to make the user experience of the journalist being harassed online less traumatizing. There's a way to provide them with a trauma-informed support system where they wouldn't get to re-explain all the time their abuse, to re-explain the situation when they need to report it. And there's a way also to empower civil society organizations supporting journalists so that they make it easier for the journalists being harassed online when they have to report, document, and prioritize their case to social media platforms. So I also want to, but maybe later to point out to other resources. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elodie, and thank you for noting some solution-oriented comments as well. Hopefully we can discuss that a little bit more. I do want to make space for Ephraim to share some of his own experiences. I know you're very well connected with different journalists and organizations across East Africa. Can you speak to some of the challenges in terms of online violence in this context and the psychosocial impact there?
Yeah, sure. Also, our region, like most of sub-Saharan African, probably other regions, is one of the biggest challenges is one, we do have a very poor digital literacy. And in this aspect, people don't know how to engage when they're online. And also at the same time, people are not even able to identify what violence is when they see it online. And what aggravates the situation much more is the lack of technical support from the service providers, especially from the social media accounts and so forth. That is because of there's so many languages which are there in sub-Saharan Africa that they're not, whoever is offering the support, they're not able to identify the nuances within the languages and so forth. Another key challenge which we do see is one thing which has been mentioned by my colleagues is first, many journalists don't even have safe spaces. They don't even have people who can be able to acknowledge what they're going through or even understand. Like in many instances, we do get, when we are trying to offer support, one of the first questions we'll get is, but has a therapist dealt with journalists before? Do they even understand my needs or where I'm coming from? And also even context. in many situations, you'll see that the support is either coming from the West, and we don't have as many therapists in our region who can be able to offer that specific kind of support. Because again, trauma based from online attacks, it's nearly similar to the physical ones, yeah. And unfortunately, I'm not trying to degrade, but what I've seen is many therapists don't even understand trauma to that extent. And in our region, there are not as many, which is quite unfortunate. And I'm glad to hear that, DART Center is offering trainings to therapists, and that would be fantastic. But I would even want it, like in some regions, for it to be lowered to community level, where it's not possible to have therapists be able to serve specific communities. So in one thing which we have seen is, which is quite unfortunate, and it breaks my heart when I see this, is again connecting it to digital literacy, is when a journalist is, especially a female journalist, who's experienced extensive trauma, who do they report to? Their editor, who chances are is the one who's sexually assaulting them? Or do they report it to maybe the head of the media outlet, who first of all is the one who's paying them poorly and is has created an environment which is quite harsh in itself? Or maybe the person who's attacking the female journalist is a friend to the media owner. So in the end, the journalist just feel boxed in, like, why do I go? And they end up shutting it down, and just, as you say, depression and the level of sorry, I'm getting a bit annoyed. The depression and the level of, suicidal thoughts, it is real. We have had to intervene in situations to get journalists from that level of suicidal thoughts. And imagine if we were not there, and we are very few in our field. And I try to encourage more people to join our field, because the gap is quite big. And in the end, you see, it also has an impact on the families and other, because the families don't know, what do I do? Because not many people understand the impact of even just understanding how the brain works in itself. That's another challenge we do have. They're not able to piece that together with technology, how it impacts you. So that gap is extensively huge. And as much as we are celebrating, let me talk now as a techie, and as much as we're celebrating the advancements, like, oh, AI is amazing. Yes, AI is amazing, but unfortunately, with that digital literacy gap, which we're experiencing in our region, you'd find it's a politician who's using that AI to now attack the journalist who has probably never finished university, but they have got some basic skills. That's it. So in the end, you might end up experiencing, my greatest fear is in the levels of impunity within our region is just going to skyrocket. And we might see very few journalists venturing into this field, especially women journalists.
Thank you so much. It's been a lot of great information. We've touched on different types of online violence, different attacks, the impact of that psychosocially, the physical impact of that as well, the risks that come along with that, professionally, personally. And we've also touched on some of the different needs in order to better address this, right? So Javeria mentioned the need for additional language capacity in terms of regulating this online. There's a need for more therapists. There's a need for more digital literacy and solidarity. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about solutions. I don't pretend that we can solve this in this conversation, but perhaps we can shine some light on possible solutions or areas for improvement. And I will open it up to whoever wants to jump in, but I think, there's maybe a few different levels we can look at this. There's at the individual journalist level, and I know some of you work on providing direct individual support and trainings, looking at supporting newsrooms in developing procedures and reallocating resources to better support journalists. Of course, at the global organization level, having conversations like this, working on digital platform regulation. There's a number of approaches, but I want to open it up to you all for what is maybe the key or most critical change that we should prioritize in terms of looking at solutions to address this issue. Aya, would you like to begin?
Okay, so I'm going to touch base on two different aspects, because you said, I think probably one of the solutions is probably have more therapists. I would say yes and no. Yes, absolutely, because I know it's good effect. But also, I think if we want to just say that therapists can actually support journalists facing the traumatic effect of online violence, we reduce a lot the support system. So I think this is where it's very important to train media workers, to train people from the media outlets, to train people in general who are interested in the media sector and the support sector, etc., whether from donors or from the media outlets themselves or the journalist community on, as you mentioned, trauma-informed practices. You don't need to be a therapist to become a trauma-informed person. And this is very important to mention. We really need to make sure that journalists or the people who support them are people who understand what trauma means for journalists and what trauma means for active people engaging with others. Because if they understand the impact of online violence, they will create then the second part of what I'm saying as a solution. They will be creating safe spaces in the community where media work happens, and it allows people to speak up without fearing to be discriminated, without the fear of being discredited for who they are. So the idea would be to inform workplaces on how to make a well-being or more kind of psychological safer workplace where a journalist can know that once every 2 weeks can sit with their colleagues or their peers and talk about their concern, talk about their hopes, talk about the daily issues they face, not just when it comes to the professional tasks that they do, but what their professional tasks is kind of triggering in their life, and their feelings and their emotions and their hopes for the future and their concern for the futures. This allows a certain ability for people to express what they are going through without the need of going to a therapist if there's no means, if they don't have time, don't have the ability, financial ability, if they don't have the culture of going to see a therapist. But at least the workplace will allow this place of discussion. And then another thing would be really training people on creating policies and procedures that allow people who are actually targeted by online violence to understand that they are not the wrong there, but there are a support system behind them. And by doing that, it means that we are training people on understanding what online violence is in all its forms. It allows them to understand that the work is related to our emotions and that emotions affect work. And in order to be sustainable and to keep on working and to create this professional workplace, it needs to take into consideration not just the capabilities and the capacities and the professional task, but also the human side of work, which is something that unfortunately big media platform, big news agency do not really take into account, because people are replaceable. If you're not feeling well, we can have someone else replace you. So in my opinion, really, yes, it's very important to seek direct support, but also if it's not possible, at least create a safe space for people to have some aspect of self-care within the workplace.
Thank you so much, Aya. Would anyone else like to comment, please?
Yes, I want to add. You can speak.
Oh, yes, so sorry. Javeria, one moment, if we can allow Elodie to speak first, if you don't mind, and then I will invite you to jump in. Thank you.
Yes, it's definitely important to get this support system in place and to implement safety protocols within newsrooms. So today it seems still very complicated to do so in many newsrooms all over the world. The first thing I would say is to acknowledge the trauma. And as you said, Ephraim, most of the time it's really complicated for the journalists to report to their management, or for a freelancer trying to sell some article and some reporting and say, hey, I have this problem. So the first thing, if you have like no resources, is just to acknowledge that this is happening. This is not a personal problem. That's why the trolls want you to believe this is not a personal problem. This is an orchestrated attack to intimidate you because you're a journalist, because you're doing this work. This is a direct threat to press freedom. And this is why this psychological effect has to be considered as a threat to press freedom and has to be taken into account by all the conversations we have on regulating the social media platforms as well. So acknowledgements, protocols, we've made a lot of work with great civil society organizations, organizations representing journalists to work on these protocols for newsrooms. The Coalition Against Online Abuse through a working group led by PEN America worked on developing protocols for newsrooms, gathering lots of newsrooms to exchange on what could be the best safety protocols, and we develop methods, and happy to share all of these things with you to discuss how we can better adapt also these protocols depending on the different contexts. And that's also the acknowledgement, developing protocols, and developing also specific measures when it comes to discussing about regulation and what can be implemented within social media platforms.
Thank you so much, Elodie. Javeria, please.
Before I tell you the solutions for that, I need to tell you one thing, that after the change of this current regime, or the transition of the government from Imran Khan to Shehbaz Sharif, we have seen lots of things related in media. Shifa Yousafzai, Sami Ibrahim, I faced harassment, and Saber Shakir as well, and he left the country. They are journalists. Then few journalists have seen arrest as well, Ahmad Yusuf, Imran Riaz, and Shahid Aslam. And then Arshad Sharif was killed. So this much things we have faced in just like 6 and 7 months. So I want to request to international community that there should be some helpline based in UNESCO or in United Nations, that we should ask them for a help when it's come to a legal way, or if we need some help in kind of getting visas, or we need some kind of psychological help. There should be helpline to help journalist in Pakistan. And I want to say one more thing, as internet, especially the social media sites, never recognize Urdu language. So abuse and all these threats and all these dirty and filthy campaign is still on Twitter and Facebook, which give us so much stress to our families. So they should be removed as well. And no one is earning money from the character assassination of journalists on YouTube and Facebook. It's very common getting in Pakistan that people are earning and people are getting views on our character assassination. So I request to international community, because we don't have much platforms in Pakistan, we don't have that much resources, even we don't have much therapists here. So we need help for journalists if they are in trouble, if they feel stranger in their own land, if they are threatened by the powerful people for their work, they should be immediately helped by UNESCO or United Nations, because my husband was killed even before someone can do some help for him, because he don't have any visas on his passport when he left in a hurry, and UAE government deported him, and when he reached to Kenya, more unsafer than Pakistan, he was killed. So I request everyone that there should be a helpline to report such kind of abuse, which we have seen in Urdu language and posted on Urdu language on social media. It have to be removed, because which I have faced in the last week from 6 February to 11 February, it was so traumatic. It affected my health, myself, my family, and everyone. But the content is still available to read through more people, and they are asking question for me that I get married in Iddat. It's a lie. I never got married in Iddat. I'm still in my mourning period. That's why I'm not right now in a Paris sitting with you all guys, and I'm suffering a lot mentally and physically, because still no one is arrested in my husband case. So there should be some helpline, emergency helpline for all journalists. There should be some data. What are the risks related to all this social media campaign? What are the risks they are facing after their reporting, and how they are targeted by trolls? I have noticed one thing in Pakistan, that pro government accounts, they do character assassination, and we can't do anything because they are some kind of they have a backing and the support of powerful people. So because of them, the common people also engage in varying levels of gender-based slurs, and mostly the journalists critical of the government receive more threats and more abuse rather than the pro-government journalists. Right now, community is totally divided between pro-government and anti-government media community I'm talking about. And even I, because I criticize government as well, so I have never seen a support from my own community because they support this coalition and this government. So I was like a bit upset, but the international community like UNESCO and the other organization, they give me a support at that difficult time. So thank you so much for taking me in this conference. And I spoke about my husband and I spoke about my experience. It was very difficult, but usually in Pakistan, we don't need to get any help from international community or from local authorities. There should be some kind of organization who teach women journalists and journalists about this all harassment, how to face this, how to deal this. And there should be a therapist as well to help us in a difficult situation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Javeria, for your comments. Ephraim, I'd like to invite you, if you would also like to say something solution-oriented, and I will encourage you perhaps if you'd like to comment on digital platform regulation.
Yes, that. So let me start with that digital platform regulation. That is something which has to be taken extremely seriously. And the reason being is, right now, as we are at right now, I'm guessing some of us are around what, 20 going up, and some of us are reaching around 60 and so forth. There is a generation that is coming, which will take this online violence to another level. And the one key thing that we are seeing is how the gamification of violence, it's being done online, but then it's easily transitioning off to now offline. For example, in the US now, it's commonly has been recorded how somebody just shows a gun, and I'm going to shoot you, and then within hours, somebody's outside and just killing them instantly because they are just gamified it, or you're just seeing it, it's just fun, and they're fully disconnected with reality in itself. And you can imagine if that's the generation which is coming, right now is the best time to start putting fundamental layers of safety infrastructure in place, be it policies or even within the tech platforms when it comes to design or other. So it's something which I really want to beg the tech companies not just to do it by themselves. There's a key responsibility which they do have. Yes, it's fantastic that they want to create tools which end up joining us together. But if you come from a systems approach thinking, whenever you're trying to do something good, there's always something bad which comes with, and it would be nice to try to identify early enough and try to put mitigation measures in advance. So it means working with so many people before then. So in regards to solutions, so there's a lot of what do you call it, responsive approaches, but I like focusing on preventative measures or things you can do in advance before the incidents do come up. And it's something which we in us at IREX, and I believe also for you, we try to encourage people to think that way, so to reduce the impact. And one of the things which has worked quite well is creating solidarity groups, and not necessarily having to wait for a trainer to come or waiting for resources to come to you. And these solidarity groups can be spaces where journalists can be able to sit and talk and air out the reality of what they're expressing and feeling. One amazing thing is, I know this is women, we are discussing about online violence against women, but just to give you two key examples. I saw how women journalists during elections in western of Kenya, how they were able to come around quickly to assist a journalist who had been cornered between a violent group and the police. And to see that and round up and not having to wait for me to come and guide them through, that was impressive. And it's something which I'm really, really encouraging. Another example is, and this is in psychosocial, is in Tanzania when we saw how we brought a group of men together, and we saw there's a gender element when it comes to men and psychosocial, which we never thought to be that intense. But for them, they came together and saw that they can actually support each other and talk about deeper issues. It might be seen like trivial, like, oh, it seems like we're just going to be sitting and talk tea and kumbaya, but no, it does have a huge, huge impact as a community, especially if you see yourself as journalists. And also these solidarity groups, it can also go beyond, whereby is reaching out to support agencies to maybe to be part of you, or even engaging security agencies and even educate them. I remember during one support case, a journalist was going through a stalking situation, cyber stalking, and it ended up becoming an actual physical stalking. And the police they could not be able to piece the two because the digital literacy is poor. And they're like, oh, so you're pretty and this person likes you, so what's a big deal? So there is an element where through solidarity, you don't have to wait for funding to come from, I don't know which government to come and fund your local government so that the training can go to the security agencies. We have seen instances like in Kenya where journalist solidarity group actually reached out to the police and educated them, and they started collaborating quite well. So those are the small little things which can be done. So another thing which I saw work quite well, and this might be a bit trivial, but I do have to say, sadly, there's a disconnect between media outlets and the public. There is a disconnect between journalists and the public. The feedback loop is not in existence in many places. So you find the media doesn't fully connect to the people. And then in the end, the people are wondering, like, what is this journalist doing here? They're always talking about ABCD, which has nothing to do with me. And they never get to listen to me. And one thing which I saw work quite well in Kenya is when the Kenya Editors Guild, because they noticed that the public are now listening to more of opinion people and attacks were gearing towards media outlets. They started doing around the country meetings with the local communities to reconnect them with them so that they can understand who the media are, who is a journalist and why a journalist is a professional. And that is something which doesn't tend to come out a lot because sadly, because I feel like journalism needs like a rebrand, because unfortunately people don't see journalists the equivalent of like doctors. And the reason why I'm saying this is like doctors are seen as this person who's unbiased. And if I approach them, this is somebody who will tell me as it is and nothing else. And unfortunately, the way now journalists are being seen is they're either left, right, or other. And in this, it now creates a situation of them versus us and so forth. And I want to encourage more journalists to try to reconnect themselves with the public, create spaces where they can get more feedback and also re-educate. It's part of media literacy, which is something which I am really pushing for. Media literacy, because in some countries you find where, like 2 countries around my region, you find the public believe more on the authoritarian government and not the journalists. Now you can imagine how the attacks can be steered in a very direct way towards journalists through funded operations by the state actors and so forth. And the reason why I'm pushing for this, we have a very successful program at IREX, is called L2D, and it carried out digital and media literacy across Ukraine. And right now, I'm so happy to see that they ended up carrying out media literacy in schools, colleges, and organizations on how to read news. And what is the role of a journalist and why they're not out there to fight you or to be against you, or they're not being funded by some dark agency and so forth. And you can see how it has had quite an interesting impact in Ukraine, whereby the country wasn't as polarized as people would have expected. And unfortunately, let's say in a place like Ethiopia, which I do have to mention, where media literacy was low, the level of tech companies' moderation was quite poor. Fake news and attacks against journalists was intense online, to a point it impacted not only just the journalists themselves, but also the nation as it is. Gee, I can go on, but but yeah, I would really want to encourage more conversations like this to continue, and not just amongst journalists, but also with the other companies and the local people as much as you can.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that. And this is a nice segue talking about Learn to Discern as a resource. I do want us to quickly go around so everyone has the opportunity to highlight different and specific resources, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. I want to ensure there's some time for that as well. And as we shift to discuss specific resources that may be valuable to the audience here today, or maybe it's something that has just personally helped each of you, please feel free to share. I will first start actually by again mentioning the chilling, which is, of course, an excellent resource from UNESCO and the International Center for Journalists. I do also want to note that IREX is the lead implementer on the Transform Digital Spaces to Reflect Feminist Democratic Principles project, called Transform for short. And this project will aim to address tech-facilitated gender-based violence, focusing on how it affects women in politics and public life. So I encourage everyone to please check out IREX.org, follow. There will be different resources and publications that come out around that project and that work. And with that, I'll invite Javeria. Would you like to speak to some resource that has maybe been valuable or helpful to you?
Yeah, I want to add one more thing regarding to IREX and UNESCO. There should be Urdu content on their website as well, because few people can't understand the English language, the difficulty to able to read in that or to understand in that. So there should be some kind of emergency response emails or numbers, and some booklets on on their webs to download and read it and apply all that things when they faced emergency, like my husband faced that violence and I faced that violence, so they can get help, because I got help. UNESCO being so kind to me. Now IREX is also in contact. So journalists should speak up for their rights and for their freedom of speech. They should not stay silent. So and the training is also a very important part, that how to do in such kind of situation when your life is in danger, you are facing on ground violence, online violence, and there is a systematic trend against you. How to report this on social media and to the concerned organizations like Committee to Protect Journalists and IREX, and to UNESCO, because UNESCO also have a mandate of a freedom of speech related to journalists. But people are not aware of this, so they become helpless. Even my husband, he didn't take any help from any international organization. After his assassination, I come to know about that there are so many international organizations like UNESCO, like Reporters Without Borders, like other organization based in France, who help journalists in that kind of situation. So I think there must be more advocacy related to this thing, that how to get help in this kind of situation. And there should be some helpline in Urdu language or in Urdu content or in English as well, for the journalists of South Asia, who are working in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, and they speak Urdu as well. So they will get help quickly, and they will not face that kind of harassment and threats which my husband has faced, and he died in the line of duty in the journalism. Then I am also in that kind of situation right now. But there should be some kind of mechanism to access help quickly and to save one's life, because every life is very important to me. And I wish no one can face that kind of violence which I have faced, which my husband and family has faced in these 2-3 months. So journalism is not a crime. Freedom of speech is our right. That's our fundamental right. So we should work together for this thing, and we should educate people whenever they face such kind of scary cases and such kind of issues related to their life and their work, and powerful people are after their life, what should they do, and how they can save their self, because the life come first, then I think the work come later. So I think we need to work together for that, and every life is valuable, and every life is matter to me. So I think we should do these things together, and we should raise violence for those, we should raise voice for those people who are affected by the violence. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think you raised a great point about ensuring that resources are available in different languages. So I'll ask, as others maybe note specific resources, if you could highlight if there are different languages that these are available in. And we'll go furthest again and down the line. Aya, please begin.
Okay, so I know that my peers here will be talking about many resources, but I would like to just give an example of something very practical that within IREX and SAFE initiative we do, is kind of make it available for everyone in this community to be able to understand a little bit more what holistic safety means. And so we have some resources related to holistic safety, and it shows really well how digital security and the use of internet from the journalist, but also from the audience, is done, and how it is directly affected or has an effect on the physical safety of a person, and automatically on the psychosocial and well-being of the person. So for me, it's very important to mention some of the resources that are really holistic, but also not to talk more in a lot of details from the psychological aspect of what would be the solutions. I would like to mention something that within our SAFE initiative from the Mhanna Center, we really do, and we felt that is really working well to influence media and news agencies and civil society organization, and influence them to go into the direction of creating a safer community of support system, is really what Ephraim was saying: be preventive, be proactive, and not always wait for something bad to happen to respond to it. And by that, what we do as the solidarity event works very well, but also we have what we call the advisory network. And I really usually push all the media outlets and civil society organization we support or work with to create this type of advisory network from people that are journalists, media workers, human rights defenders, but also people from donors' side, people from bigger agencies, people from the INGOs or the international community involved in developing programs and implementing and giving grants to programs and to media initiatives. It's very important for them to be part of a table where people talk about the problems and the issues that could happen in case, for example, a group of women are being targeted or harassed. Because what we really see, and I would really like to mention, in some of our regions, when no one can criticize the work of a woman, for example, they go and criticize her as a woman, as a person, and they will really target her personal life and attack her family, attack her reputation, just to discredit her because they don't have anything to say about her media work. So in order to avoid that, or in order to acknowledge that it will happen, because people can be mean and some people would just want to attack a person, it's very important to create a type of very creative ways to make people accept this. And why I'm mentioning this, because we know that there's a lot of pushback sometimes from news agencies, from board members, from the director or executive directors of outlets and agencies, because for them, like, we want to direct or to manage the media work and the journalism work and not really care about the human aspect of it. So it's important for us to do something that we found very creative and useful, is to bring in the management and kind of train them on how important it is for them to make sure that their staff are safe, but also then bring the staff and push them to have a conversation with their management. So it goes two-way, and we find that it's actually working. And by being creative doing this, we tend to push them to be very fun while working on something that serious, by, for example, asking them to do role playing. I will actually invite some kind of macho man to pick from a box some characters that happen to be not that macho in their head. For example, women journalists, for example, media workers belonging to vulnerable communities, and start a conversation, putting themselves in their shoes and consider what would they ideally feel the need to have to feel protected within their workplace. I know it's like, it's playful, yes, but honestly, this is a solution we're finding really working well in our countries of operation, where people are tired, where people are dealing with many aspects of trauma, not just like the attacks, but political, war-related, economic crisis. So sometimes we just give them this space to feel creative, to feel that they are doing something fun, but actually at the end, it is leading them to understand the need of policies and understand the need of doing something that supports psychosocially their peers. And I think this is a solution that is very psychological, but also related to workplace policies and need to create a bigger picture of not direct support.
Thank you so much, Aya. I do want Elodie and Ephraim to have space to share resources. I have to ask you to keep it very, very brief if you can. 30 seconds.
I'm gonna be quick. I love the role player thing. I think I'm gonna try to implement this in my own training. So first of all, how we have a UNESCO resource, how to report safely for women journalists. This resource exists in English, in Spanish, and in French. Comment exercer le journalisme en toute sécurité. You can have a look for your organization on the online harassment field manual.org. This is a resource developed by Pan America Online Abuse Defense Team. Over the last few years, develops expertise on this topic, and this resource exists in English, in Spanish, in Arabic, in Swahili, and in French. It has been co-designed with partners, digital safety experts, based on interviews of journalists and therapists in different geographical areas. So it's really a resources adapted for different geographical areas. If you're interested in joining a coalition of civil society organizations focusing on online harassment of journalists, where we discuss all this topic, there's the Coalition Against Online Abuse, gathering plus 70 organizations based in the US and internationally to discuss this topic. Feel free to reach out. The European Federation of Journalists developed a resource, Safety for Journalists. It's like a hub of resources more for European journalists. And I'm interested in reaching out to anybody interested for the escalation channel project for journalists I'm working on at Harvard. I think Javeria mentioned the need for helpline. This project, the goal of this project is to empower helplines to build a more clarified, systemized communication process with social media platforms when a journalist is harassed online, to provide them with individualized and trauma-informed support. So feel free to reach out on this. And thank you so much. It's been an honor. And thank you, Javeria, for taking the time to share with us.
Thank you so much. Ephraim, please, as quickly as you can. I do want to make sure that we have a little time for Q&A.
All right, sure. So everything they've said, done. But yeah, so there are the other tools to consider, and especially there's one tool you've mentioned. Some of the tools I mentioned, I want to encourage you not to just to look from a point of view as a journalist, but at times you may need to educate your sources, because they also do get violent attacks themselves, you end up getting now vicarious trauma as journalists. That's something key which gets forgotten a lot. So there's another tool, which it's by Bellingcat. They've got a huge resource, and one element is on safety, but also you can be able to use the open source intelligence approaches to try to help you identify where the source of the attack is coming from, and so forth if you want, or to verify if something is genuine or not. Then for the people who are considering who are in Africa and watching this, please consider going to Code for Africa. And they've got a program with Google where they teach on digital literacy skills and also digital journalism skills, just to get you up to speed as to be able to engage proactively in this space, and also be able to educate your editors and bosses about digital literacy, so they don't think that you're nuts or other. And also because of the coming generations, and this is something which I hold very dear, Google came up with something called Interland, which educates children and young people as to how to engage when they're online. And this is, again, focusing on preventative and trying to make sure journalists are safer in future. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so very much. Thank you to all the panelists for everything you've shared throughout this conversation. This has been amazing to hear from you. I do recognize that we're very close to our end time. I hope some of you can stay with us. If anyone has any questions at this time, we'll open the floor for that. And I know there's some online. Yes, please.
So there are a couple of questions from the online audience. I don't think we have time to answer all of them, but one question is on technical security. How well is the use of anonymous proxies like Tor towards protecting the user credentials of journalists? Maybe very briefly, one of you could speak on technical security solutions. Thank you.
The question is on Tor, right? Yes. Tor is most advised for journalists doing investigation. Actually, the first thing to do is to do a risk assessment of your own situation, depending on who you think your harassers or digital aggressors can be. What is the most adequate situation, digital safety model that you have to implement. So Tor is considered as, yes, it's an advised tool in main situation, but not necessarily, it depends on the risk. So I guess that the reply is more, it depends on what you're working on, what is your investigation. But so I wouldn't say, yes, it's sure or it's not sure. It really depends, and I'm happy to follow up if there's a specific question on that.
Great, thank you so much. Please.
Thank you, all speakers. But for the resources, can you share it with us by email, all the resources you sent? Because I'm from Jordan, and I'm with you, for the people who we recognize that there is online violence and also gender-based violence for journalists, but unfortunately there is no any reported cases. When we did research, none of women journalists they report this violence, and we are in need of this what they call concrete policy and procedure. Because we did gender policy regional training, and we came out with a gender policy and we spread it for all media institute. But unfortunately, they put it as to look nice, but it's not. They don't implement it. So I think these resources are very useful for journalists to know about it and to follow, because they don't feel protected. That's why they don't even report. So if I think if they feel more safe, they will at least know what to do if they are in this case. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this. And I think in terms of sharing resources, there's certainly a way that we can compile a list from this conversation and share it out with those who have registered for this event. So thank you for flagging that question. This is so important.
And surprisingly enough, there are many new resources in Arabic, translated to Arabic, which was not the case 5 years ago. But now, I mean, the UNESCO, IREX, we have like, and there's the ACOS Alliance with Samir Kassir Foundation. Like, there's plenty of resources translated to Arabic, much more than before. So.
Yeah, but the idea, the journalists themselves, they need to know about it.
Thank you. I'm speaking on behalf of interests of Russian media society. In connection with today's discussion, I would like to raise a couple of interconnected challenges to press media and journalist subjects connected to this internet platforms policy. The problem is lack of regulation rules which allow misuse of global web for politicated proposals. For example, in Ukraine, an extremist web platform Mirotvorets is used to persecute independent journalists. Their personal data is published along with calls for physical assaults, and this site functioning for many years, and the national regulator does nothing. Furthermore, some internet platforms allows for voluntary choices to block media sources with politicated pretext and with no explanation of reasons behind. I have a list of examples that I can share, but cut a long story short, I would like to ask one question. What can be done and what criteria could be used in order to protect journalists from persecution in internet and limiting their freedom of speech with voluntary decisions of internet platforms? Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for this question. I think we can maybe answer this at a high level. Ephraim, would you like to say something generally?
Yeah, that's a very heavy question, and yeah, it should be answered at a higher level. But in itself, it's quite a difficult thing to answer, because at times, unfortunately, like when it comes to digital safety, security, and attacks online, there is no perfect solution. There's a lot of layering which needs to be done to make sure when you're attacked on this side, you've got something on standby to make sure that you're continuing to operate and so forth. Because again, like let me say, like for example, in Tanzania, with the journalists who are trying to share their news, but then the government was using the Twitter policies to try to target the journalists themselves to shut them down. Now you can see they might be kicked out of that platform, but maybe there's another platform where they could be able to steer them in a specific way. But again, let me go back to solidarity building. Before that, for those forms of attacks do come in, please try to build huge solidarity groups so that when that attack does happen to you, there is so much noise that is being made to make sure that you're brought back up and live, or you have got another group that is now reporting on your behalf as to what we saw in Uganda when the internet shut down. Kenyan journalists came up and now they are reporting on behalf of Ugandan journalists. So that is one way to go about it. And actually on that, because you're talking about violence against women, it would be nice to form those solidarity groups whereby when women journalists are feeling like they're being attacked and so forth, the male journalists can come and now support them in such situations and create that layer of safety too. So yeah, so it's not as simple. Yeah, there's a lot of layering.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
I think with that, we will conclude, and I just want to again thank everyone for joining in person, online. A huge thank you to our panelists for everything that they have shared in terms of their personal stories, their expertise. This is a complicated issue. It is a painful issue, and I appreciate everyone's openness and respect for the conversation. I think this theme of building support systems and solidarity has come up throughout the conversation, and I hope that this panel discussion can contribute to that in some way and normalize some of the much needed conversation around this topic. So again, I thank you all. I thank UNESCO and IREX, and hopefully everyone can keep this conversation in mind going into the other sessions that are part of the Internet for Trust conference. So thank you again, and with that, we'll conclude.